into the next chapter. Remember the context of chapters 21 and 22 is focused on the priesthood. After we get done with this chapter, we're going to get back into the responsibilities of all of Israel. Certainly when it comes to special days, special holy days, these days of convocation. Jack, would you mind opening us up with a word of prayer?
Dear Lord, we're so very grateful for the vast amount of blessings that we each have. Lord, we're thankful for this day, this Sunday morning that you bless us with. You bless us with the ability to come to this meeting place and meet with your people. Lord, as we take this time to study your word, we ask that you be with us as we study your word so we're able to understand it properly and according to your will and not our own. Lord, we thank you for everything. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. All right, so last week we left off in this section, the requirements for the sacrifices. Now, like I said, this is sacrifices that all of Israel is to participate in. But remember, it's the priesthood that does the offering for on behalf of the people. And so now we have some more detail about these sacrifices. Just to pick up where we left off, verse 17. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to Aaron and to his sons and to all the sons of Israel, and say to them, any man of the house of Israel or of the aliens in Israel who presents his offering, whether it is any of their votive or any of their free will offerings, which they present to the Lord for a burnt offering, for you to be accepted, it must be a male without defect from the cattle, the sheep, or the goats. Whatever has defect you shall not offer, for it will not be accepted for you. When a man offers a sacrifice of peace offerings to the Lord to fulfill a special vow or a free will offering of the herd of the flock, it must be perfect to be accepted. There shall be no defect in it. Those that are blind or fractured or maimed or having a running sore or eczema or scabs, you shall not offer to the Lord, nor make of them an offering by fire on the altar to the Lord. In respect to an ox or a lamb which has an overgrown or stunted member, you may present it for a free will offering, but for a vow it will not be accepted. Also anything with its testicles bruised or crushed or torn or cut, you shall not offer to the Lord or sacrifice in your land, nor shall you accept any such from the hand of a foreigner for offering as the food for your God, for their corruption is in them. They have a defect, and they shall not be accepted for you." We had talked about this last week. What sort of defects were unacceptable in sacrifices?
Any kind of physical defect.
That's right. Any kind of physical defect. But is it only physical defects? What about an Israelite who is to offer an animal that has no physical defects but is purchased from a foreigner? Is that to be accepted? No, that is not to be accepted. That's right. And why? Why? And we ended with this last week. You know, why do you think meat purchased from a foreigner was unacceptable?
Well, they didn't know but what there was some unseen thing wrong with it.
Yeah. But what was it that you said, Steve?
It was just not acceptable, you know. It's like, it amazes me how Jesus was perfect sacrifice, and these are close, but they're still not perfect. You know, you're still watching the Old Testament passages now.
Yeah. But in particular, it says for their corruption is in them. How is that? How do these animals have anything to do with the sins of foreign nations and the corruption of foreign nations?
It could have been used in a religious
Possibly.
way.
Possibly. But,
Because obviously, there was a problem with people, having sex with animals.
yeah,
With the pagan people they
Sure.
were going in to live amongst.
sure, sure. You know, and this is just a,
It would be totally unacceptable because it should have been killed.
and this is just a thought question. You know, or it could be anything that's related to the pagan nations around them is going to be unacceptable to God. God wants his worship and his sacrifices to be pure in every way. And to not be defiled in any way, defiled either with physical defects or defiled in the sense that these animals came from pagan nations. God wants his sacrifices to be from his people and from the herds of their flocks.
That's like God
Yeah.
wants his people to marry his people.
Yeah, that's right. All right, so as we wrap up this chapter here, we're going to talk about some additional requirements. Starting at verse 26, it says, "Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, When an ox or sheep or goat is born, it shall remain 7 days with its mother, and from the eighth day on, it shall be accepted as a sacrifice of an offering by fire to the Lord. But whether it is an ox or a sheep, you shall not kill both it and its young in 1 day. When you sacrifice a sacrifice of thanksgiving to the Lord, you shall sacrifice it so that you may be accepted. It shall be eaten on the same day. You shall leave none of it until morning. I am the Lord." So what are the rules concerning the beasts offered here?
The offspring will stay with its mother for 7 days.
That's right. That's right. And what else?
You do not kill the mother or the baby on the same day.
On the same. Yeah, that's right. So why do you think the animals and its young can't be offered on the same day? The rules here are pretty clear, but the reason why maybe not be so clear to us. Why do you think? You know, I've read commentators say, well, you know, it could be that this is God's way to make sure that the Israelites aren't in a way through their sacrifices culling the herd, right? It's going to be not only is it going to be a way that the Israelites are going to be able to do their offerings, but do so in such a way that the blessings that God gives them through the livestock is maintained. But also it could be, you know, what we're looking at again is a relation to the pagan practices and the pagan worship of the Canaanites and their fertility gods. In offering the mother and its calf, the mother and its young, you know, upon the same altar in the same day. Go ahead, Mimo.
Well, when I first read this during the study, I thought, well, that mother's milk is important for the animal's health.
Mhm.
I don't know if that's possibly a reason or not.
Yep.
It just came to mind.
That's true. That's true. Now, when an ox or sheep or a goat is born, it shall remain seven days with its mother. What do you think about the 7-day period before it can be offered? Remember, we're talking about offering sacrifices that are perfect, right? Go ahead, Katie.
I don't know if the same applies to animals as it does to humans, but before a human mother, before her milk comes in, the colostrum, I think is what it's called,
Mm-hmm.
is what is really loaded with boosters for the immune system and things of that nature.
Yes. And, I don't claim to be an expert in husbandry, but it could also be, for the health aspects. There may be some health aspects for the mother as well. Go ahead, Meemaw.
Also, if there's a defect, in the animal, it might show up.
It might show up, yeah. That's what I was thinking too. You remember how we were talking about the rules concerning leprosy? If there's a spot on the body that is suspected, that's at the very least suspect, you're supposed to wait a period of what, 7 days to see whether or not things start to form up. Any problems start to issue. As I mentioned, multiple things could be true at once. All of these things could be part of this. And like I said, the Israelites, their objective is to be obedient. They are just to do. And again, the rules, the regulations is very clear. Now the reason why, not so much. But I do think that these are good thought questions. Well, what about the law concerning Thanksgiving offering? What is the law concerning a Thanksgiving offering?
It's to be a free will offering.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
And, let's see, free will offering.
Look at verse 29 and 30.
The same day you will eat it, and leave none of it until the morning.
Yeah, the same day you should eat it. And leave. Why? Why no leftovers?
They didn't have refrigerators,
No, that's true.
and they were in a hot climate.
Yeah.
He's protecting his people.
Yeah, for sure. Go ahead, Janice.
It can be, this can have a defect. It can be a part too long or too short for a free will offering.
Okay.
I already mentioned that.
Yep. But either way, that whenever they sacrifice a sacrifice of thanksgiving to the Lord, you shall sacrifice it that you may be accepted, and of course that would include sacrifice it in such a way that it may be accepted. It must be able to fit the criteria that the Lord gives to the people for sacrifice. Verse 31. So you shall keep my commandments and do them. I am the Lord. You shall not profane my holy name. But I will be sanctified among the sons of Israel. I am the Lord who sanctifies you, who brought you out from the land of Egypt to be your God. I am the Lord. So why were the Israelites told to keep God's laws here? Go ahead.
You were asking earlier about why God would tell them not to do this or that, and
Mhm.
this is the reason. That's how He wants it. He's sanctifying His people, and what He gives them ought to be sanctified as well.
That's right. Yeah. You shall keep my commandments and do them. Well, what's the difference between keeping the commandments of God and doing them? You shall keep my commandments and do them.
You have to do them to keep them.
Yeah, you think? He's making it very clear that there are things that God requires his people to do. And there's a lot of people in the religious world that are so afraid of the concept of Christians doing things. And of course, this fear of Christian doing things, I can lay that right at the feet of denominationalism, because there are things that denominations require of people to do that are not required in the scriptures. They're just not. It's not taught in the Bible. They're not biblical concepts. They're not biblical commandments. So there are those that see these things, and then they say, well, you you don't have to do any of these things in order to be saved. They swing all the way to the other end of the spectrum and say, so therefore, there's nothing that a person has to do in order to be saved. But even from the beginning, there were things that God requires his people to do. And, Christians ought not be afraid of this idea of us doing things, of us doing works, keeping God's commandments. Go ahead, Eric, and then Mimo.
Yes, and this is in an era of free will. God wants them to choose to obey him. So, if you think deeply on this is not a blackmail situation. God moved first. He says, do these because I am your God, that I moved first. I got you out of Egypt. So these are all in memorial. It's not a blackmail situation. Yeah, exactly.
Why do you think that Egypt is mentioned here? I think Eric just touched on it. Why do you think Egypt is the subject matter?
We also have learned in Egypt a lot of things contrary to God's will.
Yes. Oh, okay. All right. Good point. I didn't think about that. Egypt.
Keeps reminding them about
Egypt.
leading them through the water.
Yeah. Just like in Canaan, Egypt was a land of idolatry. The Egyptians, while the Canaanites had their Baal, the Egyptians had the Nile River to worship. They had frogs to worship. They had the sun to worship. They had all these different things. Again, worshiping the created rather than the creator. But now God is telling them, I brought you out of Egypt. Not only did God bring them out of a land of bondage and slavery, but he also brought them out of a land of idolatry. You are not to follow after these foreign gods. You are to do my commandments. You are to keep my commandments. You are to do them. Sister Janice?
And also, what he did in Egypt, how he brought them out, the nations of the land that they were going to were fearful. His name was renowned on all the earth. Even when Samuel was first coming up and Eli was the priest, and when the Philistines and the Israelites fought, even then the Israelites brought the ark to the army into their battle, and they were shouting, and they were like, oh, what are we going to do? This is the God, they're bringing the gods who fought, the Egyptians. So that was renowned.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
why wouldn't they want to obey this great God?
Yes. And again, the Israelites were told to keep the commandments and to do them. Is it not easier to keep commandments and do them when it's done from a heart of love and a heart of thanksgiving rather than under compulsion? Being compelled to do a thing because you have to do it. To do a thing simply because you're told. When you do a thing because of a heart of love and thankfulness, you're going to want to do those things. I am the one who led you out of Egypt. We're going to see all of these things that the Israelites have to do and memorials that they're going to have to keep related to what God did for them, so that the Israelites they remember it was he who led the Israelites out of Egypt. Brother Mick.
Yeah, pretty much the same thing. I was going to hit on. When he says, "Therefore you shall keep my commandments and perform them," I'm the Lord, the one who brought you out of the land of Egypt. It's a remembrance, and it kind of is pretty well to me. What I see is whenever Jesus says in John 13, whenever he says, "Love as I have loved you, love each other as I have loved you." It's recognizing
sure, for sure. All right, any other thoughts? Did I miss a hand? Go ahead, Mimo.
Well, whenever we give our very best to God in our worship and our very best giving or treasure to God, and keep His commandments, we testify to God's supreme worth.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Not only that, we also testify to His holiness as well.
Right.
And and again, in verse 32, he says, "You shall not profane my holy name, but I will be sanctified." How was God sanctified by the people? By their obedience.
And so
Already, God's holy. God is holy, whether or not the people worship Him, decide to worship Him or not, right? But how does the people keep God sanctified in their hearts? Obedience, doing what God said to do. Go ahead, Mimo.
another thing, when we give our best and keep His commandments, instead of giving God what's common, giving Him, things without blemish, we also demonstrate the true religion and demonstrate God's supreme being, that He is holy.
Yeah. All right. Well, there's nothing else to be said for chapter 22. We are going to move on into chapter 23. Chapter 23. We're getting into the next section. We're getting pretty close to being done with Leviticus here. Chapter 23. The subject matter here is going to be the appointed times. The appointed times. Certain days that the Israelites are to keep. Okay. What did the Israelites have to do? How about this? What do Christians have to do in order to be pleasing to God? What?
His commandments.
Okay.
Keep them.
Can we be more specific?
We are not to use his name in vain. We are to love our neighbors and our enemies
Mhm.
as ourselves. We are to meet on the first day of the week as he has commanded. We are to
Oh, I'm really glad that you mentioned that, because a lot of people, they tend to skip over that part. What does a person have to do in order to be pleasing to God? Obviously, just like the people in the days of old, you had to be cleansed with blood. Okay, Christians today, in order to be pleasing with God, we have to be cleansed with blood too. We have to be cleansed with the blood of Christ, and we do that through faithful obedience to Him. Right? There's other things that we do, just like the people in the days of old. They had to keep themselves from the corruption of sin around them. Christians today, is that what we have to do in order to be pleasing to God? James chapter 1, verse 27. We are to keep ourselves unspotted and clean from the corruption of this world. And we're in agreement with those things. But how about this? Worshiping God on a regular basis. Worshiping God on a regular basis. Just like in the days of old, Christians, we must worship God on a regular basis. And of course, in this dispensation, we're going to be reading about feast days and holidays and holy days, all these days of convocation. A Christian has no commandment to keep. The only time that the Lord has commanded us to keep is the first day of the week. When we come together to worship Him, it is a day of convocation. It is a day of worship. It is a day of study. It is a day to observe the Lord's Supper. There are a number of things that happen upon the first day of the week that Christians are to do. This is what's given to us. Now, God gives the Israelites a whole lot more. and we're going to be reading about some of these as we get into this chapter about these appointed times. And this chapter, we're probably not going to get through it today because this chapter is a little longer than the others and a lot more technical than the others. So I hope that you bear with me through it. The first part of this chapter is going to talk about the Sabbath day, and we're going to be reading about that verses 1 through 3. And starting at verse 4, it's going to give some regulation concerning the Passover and the feast of unleavened bread. Verses 4 through 8, and this is something that of course was given to the Israelites not only on this day, but all the way back in the book of Exodus chapter 12, I believe. And then also in this chapter, verses 9 through 14, we're going to talk about what the individual Israelites must do in the offering of their first fruits, which is going to take us into verse 15 through 22, the Feast of Weeks. The Feast of Weeks. Also known as what?
Festival of Weeks.
Yes, the Festival of Weeks. By the time we get into the book of Acts, in Acts chapter 2, it's known as what? Not Passover. Pentecost. Yes. Feast of Weeks. And then we're going to talk about this Feast of Trumpets. Feast of Trumpets. What's that all about? Verses 23 through 25. And then we're going to talk about the Day of Atonement. We previously talked about the Day of Atonement and what's done on that day. But we're going to talk more about it, verses 26 through 32. And the last section is going to talk about the Feast of Booths. The Feast of Booths. And depending upon your translation might say something to the effect of the Feast of Tabernacles. You know, what that was all about, when it was done, what the Israelites were supposed to do. Okay, so let's take a look at the first 3 verses. We're going to take a look at this introduction here in this section, and it's going to talk about the Sabbath. The Lord spoke again to Moses, saying, "Speak to the sons of Israel and say to them, the Lord's appointed times, which you shall proclaim as holy convocations. My appointed times are these. For 6 days work may be done, but on the 7th day there is a Sabbath of complete rest, a holy convocation. You shall not do any work. It is a Sabbath to the Lord in all of your dwellings." Before we get into this idea of Sabbath, let's talk about these holy convocations. What does convocation mean? What is a convocation? Convocation comes from the word to convocate. It means to call together a meeting, to assemble people together for a purpose. There is a meeting that is going to happen on these days. There is an assembly going to happen on these days. Presumably an assembly for the purpose of doing what? For observing these days, for offering sacrifices, for bringing their offerings to the priesthood, also for worship, also for study. Now, on these days are intended as a convocation, a day when people come together. Now, we're going to talk about this Sabbath day. The Sabbath day is a day of complete rest. Now, of course, we've talked about this. You know, we don't. I think it's a little surprising that there's very little in this context concerning the Sabbath, but that could be because the regulations concerning the Sabbath are already well known. I mean, it is, after all, one of the 10 Commandments that God gave the Israelites to follow. But they are to follow them, and the Lord calls it again a day of complete rest, and also a day of convocation, a day of worship, a day of study. Now, presumably, this is talking about the Sabbath in relation to these holy days of convocation that's talked about here, because there's going to be some days that are set that's going to be in relation to the Sabbath that happens during those time periods. Especially when we start talking about these, if you read commentators talk about these days, these feast days, these days of pilgrimage, days when people come together from all over to one place, to the tabernacle, to come and to worship God. In particular, this is going to be what's talked about here in these feasts. All right, so how do you think that a regulation? Okay, so again, the Lord underscores the fact that on the seventh day there's going to be no work done. It's a Sabbath to the Lord in all your dwellings, in all the households of the Israelites. How do you think a regulation against doing any work on this day enhances a holy convocation, a holy meeting of people coming together for worship? How do you think that not doing any work on this day enhances that? Cassie, do you have to, and then Eric? Yeah, very good. Very good. Sure. Eric?
Yeah, so it needs to be planned for.
Yeah.
And the King James says that you shall proclaim this. So God's proclaiming at one time. He may remind them, but this is for them to proclaim.
Mm-hmm.
So my mind goes to Hebrews 10:25. Plan for it. This convocation, this meeting together, announce it, be ready for it, and for 6 days, there's certain things that they need to start thinking about and doing, because there's not going to be any work to be done. So the woman of the house can't do certain things, the man of the house can't do certain things. Better plan for it.
Yes. Yeah, you better plan for it. Now, there are these feast days that we're going to talk about that they are going to be Sabbaths, so to speak, but God is going to modify this idea of doing work. Here it says that you are not to do any work, but when we start talking about these feast days, we're going to see this idea of doing any laborious work. Well, what's the difference? Why do we have these modifiers here? But Sister Cassie, that was a great idea, concerning God's convocation, the meetings for his worship. What this does is it sets aside all other activities and leaves the day open, right, for God's worship. And guess what? You're not coming into worship all tired. Well, when does the Sabbath begin?
At midnight the day before, wasn't it?
No, at twilight the day before. That's right. So guess what? On the day of Sabbath, you're going to get plenty of rest the night before. You're not going to be up doing your chores all late at night, whatever it is. And I think that these ideas were brought up. How do you think not doing any work on this day enhances our day of holy convocation? In a technical sense, on the first day of the week, Christians, we have this convocation too. We come together on the first day of the week to worship God. This is a convocation. It is holy in that it is sanctified. It is authorized by God that we are to do it. It is a commandment. So I think technically, what Christians do on the first day of the week is a holy convocation. Do you think that there's any wisdom in this regulation concerning the work? Now we don't have this Sabbath day regulation as for Christians, but is there any wisdom in that? And I think that this wisdom was shown in the comments that were made. One, preparation. Getting our hearts and our minds ready for the next day. And two, make sure that you're well rested and your mind is in the right spot for what you're going to do on the first day of the week. Mimo?
God's always taking care of his people, and he rested on the seventh day. And I think rest is good after working 6 days. It's good for your body and your health.
Yes. Yeah. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard when I ask a brother or sister, we missed you on Sunday. Where were you? Oh, we were working late. Oh, we just had a long weekend. Oh, we're just tired, and we couldn't make it. Guess what? The preparation for this day is done the day before, and I think Christians would do well to prepare ourselves in this way. Make sure that we are well rested. Make sure that we're refreshed, bright-eyed, and bushy-tailed to come in for worship. Because if we're coming in dragging, if we're coming in tired from working and all that kind of stuff, it's easy for our hearts not to be in it, because we'd rather be at home, in bed, sleeping, because we've been so busy. Go ahead, Cassie.
I think it's also like to get rid of excuses. Because like even if you have a job and like say you work in the service industry and you're a waitress, you can exempt yourself from working on Sundays because of religious responsibilities and
Sure.
commitments. So I think it's to get rid of the excuses of not coming also.
Yeah. And not to get off topic, but this could be a conversation for another day. What Christians and their jobs. Christians and their jobs that take them away from worship. Is that how about Christians, faithful Christians who might be police officers? Guess what? Crime doesn't stop on the first day of the week. We still need police officers serving our community, and certainly I think that more Christians in service to our community is actually a good thing. How about firefighters, EMS, doctors? All these sort of things. There are certain things that have to be done, but I do think that what a Christian does on the first day of the week certainly should, at the very least, give us some pause to think. What can I do? Is there anything that I can do to make it so that I can come to worship God as much as I possibly can with my work? There are some things that, as Sister Cassie had suggested. There are some jobs that are very lenient toward you when it comes to worship, service jobs in particular. You're right, Cassie.
I have a question.
Yes.
So I was raised Catholic, and we had service on Saturday nights,
Mhm.
and then also you could go Sunday, and there's like 3 services on Sundays.
Yeah.
But what does it say about going on Saturday night because you have obligations on Sunday for your job? Like say you're a nurse or something, you have to.
Oh, to worship on Saturday night.
Yeah.
Right.
I work
Because
as a
that's in accordance with the Jewish calendar. Yeah, you're right. That's when the first day of the week would begin. And like I said, this is something that you and I can talk about later, and I can pull up some information about that. But in the New Testament, there's no indication that the Jewish calendar concerning the beginning and the end of the first day of the week was being observed. Rather, it was used the Roman calendar during that time, where the first day of the week began Sunday morning at midnight. Now, there's been some debate and some disagreement, but one thing that we can all agree on is that Sunday morning would constitute the first day of the week, right? So even if Christians were to come together on a Saturday night for worship, saying, well, we're following the Jewish calendar for worship, I would feel very, very uneasy about that. But like I said, these are some technical issues that I think that can be ironed out through study. It's been a long time, since I've looked into that. But since you brought it up, I think, and especially when we're talking about holy days and days of convocation, when they begin and end, this might be a good idea to rehash those things. But thanks for bringing that up. Thanks for bringing that up. All right. Let's take a look at verse 4. These are the appointed times of the Lord, holy convocations which you shall proclaim at the times appointed for them. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month at twilight, is the Lord's Passover. Then on the 15th day of the same month, there is the feast of unleavened bread to the Lord. For 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. On the first day you shall have a holy convocation. You shall not do any laborious work. All right, so this is different than what we read about the Sabbath. This is on the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. You shall have a holy convocation. You shall not do any laborious work. But for 7 days you shall present an offering by fire to the Lord. On the seventh day is a holy convocation. You shall not do any laborious work. All right, so this is talking about the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread that immediately follows this. Not to rehash these things, but this has been talked about. We had discussed these and studied these things when we were talking about Exodus chapter 12 and chapter 13. But concerning the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread, what did the Passover commemorate?
In Egypt,
Yeah.
when they were in Egypt.
Mick?
Nehemiah said perfectly. It's the Exodus from Egypt.
The Exodus from Egypt. But is there any specific thing that the Passover represents? Go ahead.
Where God passed over the houses that had the blood on the door lintels, that he would not kill those people and children in those households.
That's right. That's right. That's exactly right. The Passover commemorated this thing. This had been given to the Israelites all the way back in the book of Exodus. But when was the Passover to begin?
Twilight.
Yes, at twilight. When? What day?
14th day of the first month.
In the 14th day of the first month. Why the 14th day of the first month? Don't you think? Yeah. Yeah, on the 14th day of the first month. When is the first month? Are we talking about January 14th here? Huh? No, yeah, in accordance with the Jewish calendar. That's right. Which falls in the March-April period. On the 14th day. Okay, so that's when the Passover was to begin. So when was the Feast of Unleavened Bread to follow? The next day. The next day, on the 15th day of the first month. Now by the time we get to the New Testament, what they had done with the Passover and with the Feast of Unleavened Bread, because it's one right after the other, it was considered as one period. So when you're talking about the Passover, it would include the Feast of Unleavened Bread that was to follow. It was all comes out to one holy period. And what did this feast commemorate? What do you think that this Feast of Unleavened Bread? Remember, it followed the Passover. Then you had this Feast of Unleavened Bread. Go ahead, Mick.
Fairly positive. Like in the Passover Seder, you have all of these things to commemorate their leaving in the desert, what they were given the provisions by God.
Yes. What were the Israelites to prepare for themselves when they left Egypt?
They had the matzah, the unleavened bread.
The unleavened bread. Why? Why was it unleavened?
They had to leave quickly.
Yes. All these things, very, very good. It would make sense why the Feast of Unleavened Bread would immediately follow the Passover, because after the Passover, that's when the Pharaoh had decided to let the Israelites go. Of course, he changed his mind afterwards, but. Oh, we already got this. What did the feast commemorate? And concerning this feast, what was done on the first and last day of this feast? It's a holy convocation. That's right. What does that again? What does it mean to convocate? To assemble together. What was that? That's right. That's right. Because again, just like the Sabbath day was a day of convocation, this is also a day of convocation too. It is a day that people come together to worship God and to study. All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and in there we ran out of time, so we're going to start picking up at verse 9. Verse 9, of course, is going to talk about the offering of first fruits. Now the offering of the first fruits is not a day of convocation. It's not the day of the first fruits that's not named here.